You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the program. I know we missed you yesterday. I took a pilgrimage out to Vail, Oregon, as far east as you can get in Oregon, and I bent down on my knees in the early morning and I prayed to God, just give me a sign, any sort of sign that marijuana should be legal across the planet. And wouldn't you know it, he blocked out the sun. I hope you enjoyed that total solar eclipse yesterday. I had just a marvelous time out there as the guest of Sarah Frank, the head of Moms for Marijuana International. She's got a new property out there in Eastern Oregon. So we made our way down from Seattle Hempfest. We spoke at Seattle Hempfest this weekend on Friday and Saturday. Coming up on the show today in our middle segment for Activist Agenda, I'm going to play for you my final speech of Seattle Hempfest for this year. It was at the Cavi Gold stage, and I spoke on how marijuana prohibition is and has always been a tool of white supremacy in America. So that's coming up in the middle of the show. So we did the Seattle Hempfest, all sorts of interesting, fun stuff happening there, met and reacquainted with so many great people from across the country, the Canna family, as it were. And you should get involved with Seattle Hempfest. If you've never been there, if you're a cannabis connoisseur and you've never been to the Seattle Hempfest, you owe it to yourself to make the pilgrimage. Put it on your bucket list. It's something you got to do. Check out hempfest.org and give a donation to keep them alive, keep them going so that we can have Hempfest for the future generations. Also coming up on the show, we'll have time for some reefer madness debunked coming out of New Jersey, where Rutgers University is going to be hosting this symposium on the effects of marijuana legalization on the youth. See, they got a Democratic gubernatorial candidate there who's likely to win, who has promised to legalize marijuana. So this professor from Rutgers University is putting on this seminar about what legalization would do to the kids, as if it's 2007, as if we don't have evidence to back up our assertions and to disprove everything they have happened to say. So that's coming up at the end of the show as well. And of course, we start everything off with the cannabis headline news, where there's some controversy going on with one of the biggest expositions in Los Angeles. Let's get to that right now.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. Controversy over the comments made by Donald Trump over the racial tensions in Charlottesville have sparked a boycott of one of the nation's largest cannabis expositions in Los Angeles. The Cannabis World Congress and Business Expo, or CWCBE, has invited Roger Stone, a longtime advisor to Trump, to present a keynote address. Following a boycott by the Minority Cannabis Business Association, or MCBA, a CWCBE managing partner responded by referring to, quote, "you people," end quote, who partner with the National Cannabis Industry Association in hosting, quote, "all-white conferences," end quote. Another managing partner of CWCBE noted how, quote, "it's funny how this plant brings people together who aren't together under any other topic. It creates the strangest of bedfellows," end quote. MCBA Director Jesse Horton isn't interested in being bedfellows with Stone, however, replying to CWCBE, quote, "he chose a known racist and misogynist as a keynote speaker. It was a poor decision to prop up someone who is trying to take advantage of our industry," end quote. Speaking at the Native American Housing Association summer meeting, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Secretary Dr. Ben Carson claimed that marijuana use was as bad for society as the opioid epidemic, saying, quote, "I'm not all that enthusiastic about marijuana because there have been numerous studies that show exposing a developing brain to marijuana can lead to lower IQs," end quote, he said. Those studies have been well debunked, most recently by studies of twins that showed cannabis use to have no independent effect on intelligence. Secretary Carson continued with the inexplicable claim that, quote, "We already have enough people with a low IQ and we don't need any more," end quote. IQ is a measurement of intelligence that is based on the distribution of test scores in a given population. There can't be too many on the low side or not enough on the high side. It's like claiming all the children in Lake Wobegon are above average. Nevada's marijuana regulators have agreed to delay the expansion of distribution licensing to meet growing demand at pot retail stores until the state tax commission can hear another appeal from a group of state liquor wholesalers next week. A Carson City judge lifted an injunction last week that had prohibited the Nevada Taxation Department from licensing anyone other than alcohol businesses to transport recreational marijuana from cultivators to dispensaries. Judge James Russell said he had no authority to override the department's decision earlier this month that there weren't enough alcohol distributors to keep up with demand. He said the independent alcohol distributors of Nevada must first exhaust all administrative remedies and file a formal appeal with the tax commission. The commission agreed Friday not to license any non-alcohol entities for distribution until the panel hears the appeal on August 29th. The Jamaica government said Monday that it has taken steps to train doctors and other stakeholders in dispensing marijuana as it moves to regulate the industry. The Ministry of Health said in a statement that 2 training workshops were held last month and that the next set of training programs will take place in October. According to the ministry, to be able to recommend medical cannabis in Jamaica, registered physicians must first be certified in the use of medicinal cannabis. Physicians with similar and verifiable training elsewhere can also become registered by the Ministry of Health to recommend medicinal cannabis in Jamaica. Meanwhile, 9 medicinal cannabis products have been registered with the Ministry of Health, 3 of which were approved in June of 2017. The legal sale of marijuana in Uruguayan pharmacies is facing challenges as banks refuse to deal with companies linked to marijuana in order to follow international financial laws. A government official said Friday that Uruguayan's banks risk running afoul of laws that ban receiving money tied to cannabis. The official was not authorized to comment publicly and spoke on the condition of anonymity. In July, marijuana went up for sale at 16 pharmacies as part of a 2013 law that made Uruguay the first to legalize a pot market covering the entire chain from plants to purchase. But one pharmacy in the capital of Montevideo has decided not to sell it after a warning by a local branch of the Spanish bank Santander. The bank said it has opted to remain out of this line of business, and state-owned Banco República, Uruguay's largest bank, also told pot-selling pharmacies that it must close their accounts. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, August 22nd.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com, City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
Activism begins with ACT. The Marijuana Agenda features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Today on the Activist Agenda, I take you back to the Seattle Hempfest that took place this last weekend for the 26th year, and it marked my 13th Seattle Hempfest, so I've now done officially half of them. I spoke on all three stages, Friday on the main stage and the Sealy stage, Saturday on the Cavi Gold stage, and if you're thinking to yourself, all three? There's only three? Yes, folks, there's only 3 stages at Hempfest this year when there's been as many as 6. The attendees haven't been donating as much, and there's been, since legalization, all sorts of problems with advertising regulations in the state of Washington that have caused a decline in sponsorships for Seattle Hempfest. So we've got to band together as the cannabis community and give to Seattle Hempfest. Visit hempfest.org and give today to make sure that there will be a 27th and a 28th and a 29th, and we can keep having Hempfest. I can't tell you how liberating it is for people, especially people coming from red states, coming from prohibition states, and nations for that matter, to experience the freedom of being around tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people like you openly consuming cannabis in a sunny park and listening to great music and checking out vendors. It really will change your perspective. So please visit hempfest.org and give all you can today. I was also part of a Hemposium panel on cannabis in the media, and I'll have highlights from these and other speeches coming up on the rest of this week's episodes of the Marijuana Agenda. For now, I'd like to give you my speech from the Cavi Gold stage. This one I have on video, a little bit of a shaky cell phone camera video, but we do the best we can. But this is my speech at the Cavi Gold stage on how marijuana prohibition is and has always been a tool of white supremacy.
Hi, but I want to tell you something about marijuana and prohibition, and something that fits in with what's going on in the news these days. You may have turned on the television, seen a lot of symbols of hate, a lot of hate going on in this world, a lot of people marching, and I can't believe this, marching under Nazi flags in America. Now, I'm sorry, my grandpa fought in World War II against Nazis, and I'm not going to stand for anything like that hatred to spread throughout America. But I want to tell you that marijuana prohibition is part of that hatred. Marijuana prohibition is, in its genesis and its continuation, white privilege. It's about racial control. It's about controlling people who think different than the status quo. It began in the early 30s when they demonized Mexicans who were smoking their loco weed, the marijuana. When everyone knew it was cannabis, everyone knew it was hemp, but if they used the word marijuana, they could fool people who had hate in their hearts to ban the plant that our founding fathers grew. It continued through Harry J. Anslinger, the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, had the job. He was the first drug czar in our nation's history from 1930 to 1962. For almost a third of the century, this racist, hateful bigot set our drug policy in America, and he set it for a very specific purpose. Harry J. Anslinger was fond of saying things like, reefer makes the darkies think they're as good as white men. I wish I could show you what one marijuana cigarette does to one of our degenerate Spanish-speaking persons. Most of the people that use marijuana are low mentally and socially because of racial conditions. It was about racism. It was founded on racism. It was used as a means of controlling people. And that did not stop as time went on. As we get into the late 60s, we get a guy named Richard Milhouse Nixon. Heard of this guy? President Nixon, guy who started our modern day drug war. Well, there's a quote from one of his advisors, his domestic social policy advisor, a guy by the name of Ehrlichman. And they asked, this reporter was asking Ehrlichman about the drug war and how the drug war got started and why'd you do the drug war? And Ehrlichman said, well, I'll tell you what it was all about. In 1968, the Nixon White House had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and black people. And we knew we couldn't make it illegal to be against the war or be black. So we knew if we made the heroin and the marijuana illegal and associated them with the blacks and the hippies, we could infiltrate their groups, we could knock down their meetings, we could tear down their movements, and we could vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. They knew it was all about controlling people who thought different, controlling people who looked different, controlling people like you, and controlling people like me. And finally, we struck back. We struck back in the 70s in Oregon when we decriminalized marijuana. We said, oh, please, at least don't throw us in jail. Give us a ticket, please. And we moved on in the 90s when California passed the Compassionate Use Act and made it legal of, oh, please, I'm dying from cancer. Don't put me in a cage. I have cancer. And we finally evolved to the very first tiptoes into true freedom, into true legalization, where any citizen, 21 and older, can use, possess, and it should be in Washington State, grow their own cannabis. Now, personally, I think the age ought to be 18. I think if you're old enough to carry a rifle in the sand, you're old enough to put a joint in your hand. If you're old enough to vote for the man, you're old enough for a joint in your hand. Are you with me on that? And we'll get there. We'll get there eventually, but we got to get what we can get and not throw a fit. We got to do what we can to take down the man every chance we get. And I'll tell you the one thing they don't want you to do, and it's not smoke weed. They know you're smoking weed. It's like, hey, we got to legalize weed so you can get high. MF, I've been getting high since 1990. I don't need any law to tell me whether I'm going to get high. You can't tell me what to do. I'm American. I'm a free person. I'm going to do with my body what I choose to do with my body. I'm going to do with my mind what I choose to do with my mind. I don't need no law to tell me that. However, I would rather not be in a cage. That'd be nice. Just don't put me in a cage. Don't take my stuff. Don't shoot my dog. Don't break up my family. I just want to be treated like a beer drinker, really. Like, I can't understand how in this country we can have beer fest, brew fest, bring your kids, we'll put a wristband on you, sign a waiver, come on, drink. And I like getting my drink on. But if we've accepted and legalized the two most harmful drugs there are, alcohol and tobacco, I don't see why it should be any mind of the business, the government, whether or not we're smoking the least harmful drug of all of them. Are you with me on that? The least harmful. So remember that decriminalization, that medical marijuana, and that legalization only happened not because they thought it would be cool, not because they're sitting in Olympia thinking, we ought to let people smoke weed. Not because they were sitting in Salem, Oregon and said, we ought to let people smoke weed. It's because she said, let people smoke weed. And he said, let people smoke weed. And you said, let people smoke weed. And we all said, let people smoke weed. And enough of us signed petitions, and enough of us voted, and we passed these laws. I love it when I talk to cynical millennials and they say, man, I don't vote, man. Voting doesn't change anything. I said, let me light up my legal joint. You tell me how voting don't change nothing. Let me go over to the pot shop and buy me some legal weed. And you tell me how voting don't change nothing. Voting is what got us legalization. Voting is what got us civil rights in this country. For oppressed people, for black people, for LGBT people, for all the marginalized people, for women, for the disabled. And we're not going backwards. I know there's some racists, there's some bigots, there's some hateful people that want to take us backwards. I ain't going back. Are you going back? We ain't going back. We're standing for freedom. We're the cannabis community. We are good people. You're good people. I'm good people. I'm Radical Russ. Thank you so much. Make some noise.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. If you're a cannabis brand looking to build trust and awareness within the community, consider becoming a sponsor of this program. Your message will be seen and heard by the most dedicated followers of marijuana policy reform, who are loyal and supportive of those brands that give back to the community. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button to learn how your brand can also be featured in my live nationwide appearances. Thank you for your support.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's not recreational. It can be destructive, and it consistently is destructive.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face-to-face with the monster of marijuana, he'd drop dead of fright.
You know, it's not easy trying to debunk 80 years of anti-marijuana propaganda in a 1-hour podcast, but let's try. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda's Reefer Madness Debunked.
On September 6th, the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School at Rutgers University in New Jersey is hosting a seminar. It's entitled Perspectives on Cannabis Legalization on Youth and Emerging Adults. First of all, I got to say, I like the term emerging adults, right? Not teenagers, not young adults, not college, emerging adults. That's that wiggle room they get so they can say the whole up to age 25 stuff. Anyway, Theodore Petty is a professor of child and adolescent psychiatry there, and he's organizing this conference in advance of the gubernatorial election in New Jersey, where Patrick Murphy, I think's the guy's name. He's the Democrat. He's a front runner, and he's strongly supporting marijuana legalization in New Jersey. So in advance of that, he's putting on this Perspectives on Cannabis Legalization on Youth and Emerging Adults. And he spoke with Rutgers Today about how he feels the legislation to end adult marijuana prohibition is going to harm society. To be clear, this is a guy who delivered these remarks today in 2017, after we've already had 8 states legalize marijuana, as if we don't have plenty of evidence as to what's going to happen with the children after legalization. You do have to give him some credit, though, for cramming as much reefer madness into one tiny little interview. 14 different points that I'm going to get to here, so buckle up. Here are the lowlights. Number 1, quote, "This legislation will promote increased acceptance that marijuana is harmless because it is legal," end quote. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. No, that's incorrect. Even before legalization, Americans are recognizing that marijuana is far safer than alcohol or tobacco, or for that matter, sugar. Its legal status doesn't change its pharmacology. Number 2, quote, "We have seen increases in marijuana use by youth in states that have passed legalization," end quote. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong too. State health officials in Colorado, Washington, and Oregon have all stated there have been no statistically significant differences in youth marijuana use post-legalization. Number 3, quote, "We also want to ensure that marijuana is available for research into conditions present in children and adolescents and is available for evidence-based treatment when appropriate for medical conditions," end quote. Yeah, I kind of doubt that he wants to ensure that. But, you know, this is the preemptive strike they always do, because they always get attacked with the whole CBD angle and the epileptic kids. And it really looks bad to be against a kid who's having a seizure in front of you. A lot easier to be kind of bigoted against, you know, a pothead smoker like me, right? Oh, you pothead, right? But the little kid, kind of hard to, kind of looks bad when you're putting them down, right? So here he's saying, we want to make sure there's research into this. Yeah, let the kids seize on the floor. Well, we'll keep researching it, right? But I don't believe this, because marijuana can't be adequately researched because it's a Schedule I substance under federal law. Now, if this Professor Petty is supporting Senator Booker's bill to deschedule marijuana, okay, then I'd be with him, but I don't think he probably does. Number 4, quote, It has also resulted in a low rate of diversion to youth and others who are turning instead to synthetic cannabinoids such as K2 or spice, or to marijuana that may be adulterated with PCP, formaldehyde, or other toxic substances. End quote. Well, yeah, you know what? I have to give him credit on this one. This one, he's actually right about. Yeah, see, that's an argument for legalization, isn't it? You're stating that your policy now, the policy you currently enjoy of marijuana prohibition, is causing there to be these other substances, the K2, the spice, these terrible, terrible substances that the kids are using instead of legal marijuana. And even if they did manage to get a hold of a legal marijuana product in the state of Oregon or Washington or Colorado, they'd be getting a hold of something that's tested. They'd be getting a hold of something that we know isn't laced with formaldehyde or PCP or anything terrible like that. This guy's making the argument for us. I mean, I appreciate it. That's awfully nice of you to make the argument for us when it comes to this situation, but it seems a little strange. I think you'd want to be on the other side of that. Anyway, let's get to. Got to look for something on the computer here real quick. Okay. Anyway, number 5. Let's get to this quote. The potency has increased significantly since the legalization of medical marijuana in California in 1996. End quote. Well, yeah, again, I have to give him credit on this one because that's actually true. There is an increase in the potency of marijuana since the early days, since the 70s, since the 80s. But again, is he making the argument for legalization for us here? Because so long as marijuana is a non-toxic product, then it doesn't make much difference whether or not it is more potent, right? Like alcohol, its higher potency is going to kill you, right? You take, 6 beers in a row, it's not going to kill you. You take 6 shots in a row, you might have some problems. The higher potency with marijuana, the only thing it means is getting you high, just as high, with less smoking. That would actually be a benefit for the lungs. So, number 6, quote, adulterated marijuana and synthetic cannabinoids can, again, we're not talking about marijuana. Those things can do all sorts of bad things to you that legalized, regulated, tested, inspected marijuana cannot do. Number 7, quote, diversion of marijuana to youth from eligible purchasers has been inadequately addressed and leads to easy access for young people. End quote. No, sorry. Surveys of youth in Colorado, Washington, and Oregon show them to have no significantly greater access to cannabis than pre-legalization. Stings conducted with young-looking buyers trying to get pot shops to sell them weed without checking IDs have an almost perfect record in not allowing kids access and far better stats than the sellers of alcohol. Number 8, quote, the youth who are showing up in the emergency room. Okay, now this is, I hate this. This is misleading. Yes, there are increased calls to poison control centers and increased visits to emergency rooms that mention marijuana. Because under legalization, now the patient can mention marijuana without worrying about having a cop called on them. I mean, I'll bet the calls for I guess, what was it? Why am I here? Why am I so sick? Maybe it's food poisoning. I'll bet those calls have gone down. Number 9, quote, decrease early initiation of youth's use of tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis. Well, that's a good idea. Yes, we would rather not have young kids starting cannabis real young. And that's why it's notable that, at least in Washington state, there's been no change in the rate of students who start marijuana use before age 13. That's from the Washington Office of Financial Management. Number 10, quote, before easier access is put into legislation, more openly available, and deemed as acceptable. Wrong again. Access does not go up for kids. They already had a hookup. They are already getting it from an illegal channel. Making legal channels doesn't increase their access, it decreases it. As for acceptable, well, kids are showing less fear and disapproval of marijuana because they used to be told it was the deadly dangerous gateway drug to heroin that turned them into schizophrenic loser dropouts with man boobs and loose morals. Now they can see that healthy, successful adults are using it recreationally and sick and disabled people are using it as medicine, and the kids are recognizing we've been lying to them all these years, and now they're adjusting their perceptions accordingly. Number 11, quote, studies that strongly suggest that pregnant women who use marijuana put their fetuses at risk for cognitive problems, end quote. Yeah, the data are inconclusive on this. Now, nobody's saying that a pregnant mom ought to be puffing tough all day, right? But I figure if maternal marijuana use was really a problem, we'd have seen a serious developmental deficit when comparing children of Rastafarian moms to non-smoking controls. And we don't see that. Number 12, quote, states where marijuana has been decriminalized or legalized for recreational use have given too little support to education about the effects of marijuana and the developing brain, end quote. Jeez, give me a break. Every state that has legalized has set the age at 21 and committed significant resources to highly visible campaigns discouraging youth use and focusing on the developing brain issue. My question is, how does Professor Petty think prohibition is going to help that issue any? Number 13, quote, and allocate funds to education and treatment as part of legalization. Yes, and every state that has legalized has done this. In fact, we legalizers put more money toward those ends than the legislatures eventually allocate. They actually take the money that we legalizers wanted to put toward drug education and youth discouragement and treatment facilities. They reallocate that money. Don't blame us for that. And finally, number 14, quote, commercialization of marijuana is expected to result in advertising and associated marketing efforts, end quote. As if advertising for marijuana is more restricted than the advertising for strip clubs. I mean, I can see taxi cabs driving by with big strip club nude girls billboards on the side of the taxi cab. You can't even put a dispensary We Love Herb on a... Oh, forget it, man. It's remarkable that a professor at a medical school could so blindly deny the scientifically verified realities of marijuana legalization. Of course, this is what our opponents are reduced to in a nation where over 60% of us support legalization and over 90% of us support medical marijuana. That's all the time we got for today. Welcome back, everybody. See you tomorrow, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it.